Hi, my name is Ross Riddleston. Welcome to this Anson McCade Future series of webinars and podcasts. Today, with the help of some industry experts, we're going to be shining some light on the future of technology and business, with particular focus on diversity, skills, and working practices. Today, we're going to be speaking to digital leader Nathan Bush. Welcome to our Anson McCade Future series of webinars. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Nathan Bush, founder of 12 High and Group Digital Manager, or previously Group Digital Manager of Super Retail Group. So to start with, Nathan, I think you're going to be talking to us about test and learn. So I'll just pass straight over to you.
Great, thanks, Ross. So I'll just do a quick 10 to 15 minute overview of test and learn in my experience and the opportunity that I see for organisations moving forward. I'll give you a few examples of what we have done in test and learn and some practical tips on how to take that into your organisation. So test and learn is really well summed up by the story of the Wright Brothers who invented the aeroplane. And this is actually where 12 High got its name from. So the Wright brothers had many failed attempts at the aeroplane before getting it right. And some of them were pretty ridiculous, including bikes with wings strapped to it flying over cliffs. But what they didn't do is they didn't try to invent the jumbo jet that can go between continents. Their mission was to prove that man can fly. And the moment that they proved man could fly was when they had a plane in the air for 12 seconds. And that's where 12 High comes from, because all we're aiming for is that 12 seconds. And that's what I've worked with at SRG, is trying to just get those moments of 12 seconds where we can prove things that they do have validity and that we can move forward with them, but they're not perfect right now. So I think the Wright Brothers story is a great example of what we're trying to achieve. So a little bit on my background. My background has been at Super Retail Group, where I led the group digital function, and that was across major projects, including one project that went for over 4.5 years. And then counterposition that with establishing our test and learn capability, which was all about how do we take ideas and try and prove them within a few weeks or a couple of months. So really two very different approaches there. And I'll speak to the test and learn side of it. Before that, as a little bit of background, I worked in agencies heading up strategy across digital, social media, and media, leading to where we are today at 12 High, which is a brand new business that I've established purely focused on test and learn. Test and learn. I don't think it's a new concept to most people. I actually catch a lot of people saying test and learn, and it's something that we generally all want to do. But what we aim to do is bring a methodology behind it. So if we look at why we want to do test and learn, we want to do it because it validates quickly and it often saves resources. So I think we've all been in the position where we've created or seen people create business cases that go for months, if not years, and float around the organization, when really we look at it and go, that time and that effort could have been spent prototyping something really quickly, getting that in front of our customers, and seeing whether it is a good idea without spending so much time in a theoretical exercise. Another benefit is that it delivers focused innovation. So we see a lot of organizations saying they want to be innovative, whether they build labs or they have partnerships with startups. We actually want to solve real problems through test and learn. We want to take real business problems, and they don't have to be digital or technology problems, but actually apply a new methodology to them to get to a result quicker. It actually allows us to have focused innovation rather than focusing on bright, shiny objects that are on the peripheral. One design principle of our test and learn approach is that we co-create. And a big part of co-creation is about taking teams on the journey, because we don't believe innovation happens by separate teams. We believe innovation happens everywhere and everyone can be innovative. So we believe that as we go through the test and learn approach, we teach our teams how to use test and learn, not only in that project, but through any other project that they may come across, so that it's an ongoing skill that we can learn. Another advantage of test and learn is that it creates new opportunities for competitive advantage. So some organizations may not be naturally innovative. Some may choose to be fast followers, and that's okay. But we always need to react to what's either going on with competition, or what's going on in the market, or what's going on with our customers, because they're all changing rapidly. By allowing the ability for our organization to test and learn with small budgets, small timeframes, and limited resources, we can actually react rather than being stuck in big, long strategy pipelines, which are hard to move around. One more example of benefits of test and learn is that it has a connection with your customers. We talked about co-creation with your team, but it's just as important to co-create with your customers. So I think we've all seen a lot of examples where we have big projects which are worked on for months, if not years, which don't actually get in front of a customer until it's produced and it's finalized and we think it's perfect. The idea of test and learn is to get that concept in front of customers really early on in the process, so that our customers can tell us whether it's a good idea at various points throughout that journey. So I love the quote from Netflix there that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. This is only recent, it's only 12 months ago, and it was in response to a feature that they were bringing out that people weren't overly fussed on. They didn't think it was a good idea, but their mentality was that if we don't test, we won't learn, and we never get better. And who wants that? And I don't think there's any organization that doesn't want that. So that's a motto that we really live to as well. So using my experience in establishing test and learn capabilities, I've put together a methodology called the OODA loop methodology. Now, it's not a new methodology. It's an adaptation from, it's actually a war methodology from the 1950s, established by John Boyd, who was a fighter pilot. John Boyd was stuck with a bunch of planes that were heavier and not as fast as some of the Korean planes going around. And he actually ended up getting the nickname of 40-second Boyd, because he could shoot down any enemy pilot within 40 seconds. And his explanation on how he did this, and what he taught throughout the Air Force as well, was this OODA loop methodology. And he described it as there's 4 stages to this. First, he observes, takes in the raw data from everything that's going on around him. And it's really important that this data is raw, and that you actually take in all the inputs as quickly as possible. You orient, you go, okay, taking in that, knowing what I know is what's happening out there, knowing what my capabilities are and what I can do and the problem I need to solve or get out of, what do I need to do, what are my options? Then decide. And obviously as a fighter pilot, it's probably important that you decide very quickly. But you make that call and you stick with that call and you follow that through, and then you act, and you follow that through. Now, the OODA loop, the idea of the OODA loop is that it accelerates. As you do it more often, you get better at it and better at it and better at it, and it keeps going. It also isn't linear, so you don't have to follow the loop at all times. So initially, you may spend more time observing and orientating, especially if you're in a new environment. It may take longer, but the idea is that once you get an idea of that, you may only have to come back to it periodically, where you spend more time deciding and acting. So you may skip between these depending on your situation and your environment. Now, we've adapted that for the test and learn methodology, and it incorporates lean practices, it incorporates agile, and it incorporates design thinking, because in my experience and what I've worked through, there is no one of those methodologies that works for every business problem. The OODA loop methodology is made to be flexible for the organization and flexible for the problem that we're facing into. So at the end of it, at the end of every OODA loop, we need to make a decision, and this is how we get momentum, and this is how we accelerate the OODA loop, and it's about whether we scale the idea, whether it's, yes, we've proven the concept, we've got our 12 seconds, we've proven enough that, yes, we'll go and expand this out. And then it may become a project or a larger piece of work. We'll kill it and go, actually, no, it didn't work. Our customers didn't respond to it, and we don't see a future for it. Therefore, we've either saved our company, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in a project that was never going to get off the ground. And we've got a whole bunch of learnings that we need to share through the organization now. We don't actually hide these killings, we actually promote them. Or we pivot it. And pivot's obviously a lean concept. And pivot's about, there's something there, but the angle that we took wasn't right. Let's take it through the loop again. But the idea is that at the end of every loop, we get an outcome, and we move forward to keep that momentum happening. So you can see here there are various stages throughout the OODA loop, and I'm not going to go into each one of them, but there are methodologies or steps within each of these actions, and it incorporates a lot of what you may already be doing, whether that's customer experience mapping, whether it's competitor analysis, your current goals and strategy. It will incorporate all these to help you accelerate through the loop. This isn't about reinventing your organizational purpose. It's about making it very clear so that we can come back to that focused innovation, and that we can actually go, well, yes, here's all the things that we do know, but what don't we know? What are the questions that we still have? And those questions are often missed in strategy because we don't have answers. Strategy typically only includes the answers we have. So for us, the questions are just important. And we use those questions to drill down into what hypotheses that we may have that we can decide and act on. So I want to take you through a couple of examples really briefly of how we have used test and learn at Super Retail Group, and how the OODA loop methodology applies to that. So the first I've got here is about delivery options. So Super Retail Group do a tremendous job in fulfilling customer orders and have had huge growth in click and collect and delivery over the last 5 years. But we didn't have all the options that other e-commerce players had. And one thing that we knew was that our customers expect a range of delivery options. And our current delivery options weren't meeting them. That was our observe and orient at a really basic level. So our decision was, out of a bunch of hypotheses around all different types of delivery methods that we may look into, we'll narrow down on one, and that's how might we offer a same-day delivery service. So we actually did a workshop where we pulled together a variety of people in the organisation from the Rebel team, including the in-store teams, a supply chain, IT, digital, and we even pulled in a startup partner who we'd been speaking to in the past, but actually hadn't had any traction in the organisation. And we pulled everyone together in one room and we said, guys, here's our hypothesis. How do we make this live tomorrow? Which, for an organisation like Super Retail Group, getting something live tomorrow is a far-flung concept. And that's not unusual for an organisation of that size. But that was the challenge. And by creating design principles around this, where we had things like, we will do manual workarounds, we will limit it to 1 or 2 stores, we won't aim for perfection, we were able to come up with something that we could actually work with our startup partner and get live in front of customers. And it actually took 3 days, not 1, but we got there in 3 days. And it was really great because it meant that the teams were involved. So how it worked was that we actually had a startup partner who our Brisbane and Chermside stores were taking orders. And instead of fulfilling them as they would normally, they had a manual intervention where they called customers and said, hey, you've ordered this, it will normally take 2 to 5 days to arrive. Would you like us to deliver it today for you? And it won't be any extra cost. And it's just something that we're trying out. And we did this over 3 days. And the response we had from customers was great. They loved the surprise and delight, obviously. But we included a survey with that as well. And that survey asked customers how much would they be willing to pay for it, in what situations would they use it. And we were able to get a lot of data there around, okay, is this one, something that customers will respond to? And two, is it economical for us? Will it actually work? Will there be a business case in this? And at the end of it, we were able to make a decision which influenced our business case and our path forward. The second example I'll give is quite different, and it's more around team collaboration. So the idea here in this example is showing that it doesn't necessarily have to be a technology problem. And one of the things that we had at Super Retail Group was that we've got a huge team, about 400 people in a building out in Launton in Brisbane. But we had 400 people across various brands and various teams who would walk in the morning and go up to their respective areas and probably stay there for most of the day. They had a self-contained kitchen, bathrooms, desks, and they didn't need to explore out of that. We had a lot of people across the organisation doing similar roles. And we said, our team do similar tasks, but are not sharing experiences. So how do we get our merch team from one brand speak to the merch team of the other? How do we make it all cross-collaborative? And in the empathy sessions, and obviously empathy coming out of design thinking methodology, we found when we spoke to our team that actually, no, they don't want to be pulled into a meeting room to be forced to share their learnings. They actually have the best interactions in their relaxed social settings. So when they're over the road at the cafe grabbing a coffee, when they run into each other at reception, or when they're flying past each other in the bathroom, it's those kind of relaxed settings that people went, actually, I get the most out of that. I find out what other people are doing. So we said, well, how might we create a central cafe to bring everyone together? That was just one idea of many that we hypothesized around how we could create this environment. So over 2 weeks, we wheeled in a barista with a hipster beard and a cafe cart, and we set him up and we paid for his coffee, and we said, okay, for 2 weeks, let's see if this works. Let's see if this brings everyone together. And it was a great experiment because we found an area that wasn't used, and we had a real buzz. We had people coming together rather than going out and getting their coffee from various places individually. So that was a real success, and we've since expanded that cafe, and it's now kind of one of the most popular spots in the office and a real collaborative hotspot. So just a different type of example to the previous delivery one. And the last example I'll run through is one around a mobile app. So when people think test and learn, they usually go straight to digital solutions. And this is probably one of the more straightforward ones. And we actually did this by issuing a challenge to our whole IT and digital team through a kind of Shark Tank activity. So one of the things that we recognized was that our in-store experience didn't necessarily match our online experience. There was a whole heap of data and a whole heap of experiences you can get online that you might not necessarily be able to get in store from details on a product or into a shelf talker. So we issued that challenge out to the team, and everyone pitched, and there was a number of other business problems as well. But the team that won actually came back with this app that said, we'll combine all the data, things like loyalty data, product data, videos, customer reviews, all through one app that we'll be able to launch to customers. We engaged a digital agency who was on board with the test and learn approach and the prototype approach, so we're not aiming for perfect, to develop an app that we could then get out in front of customers. We took the app, and it wasn't perfect. It only had 3 features at that stage, and they were pretty basic features. We actually took them into store, and we all split up, went into store, and just took it around store to ask customers to play with it and tell us what they think. The feedback we got in there was saying it was nice, but actually the information that they need, they just go to our website or they ask a team member. And that was okay. So that was really valuable. So for something that costs not much at all, we were able to provide insight back to all brand teams to go, hey, we tried this functionality. It's not what customers want. They don't see a huge amount of value in it. Let's not invest 20 times what we spent here developing a bigger app around that. Doesn't mean that apps are out forever. It means that that functionality for that app to solve that problem isn't the right one. And we move forward. So it was a really great learning experience. So a great example of a test and learn that actually had the kill at the end of it, but great lessons and helped us save money in avoiding a big costly project and helped us move forward quicker. So based on the experience that I've had in test and learn and establishing that capability at Super Retail Group, I wanted to leave you with 5 tips that I think are crucial in establishing that. The first is to establish test and learn and to have successful test and learn experiments. It's crucial that you have an engaged sponsor and a decision maker agreed on. We have had experiments where it was a bit iffy around who owns it and who the sponsor was, and it really led to decisions taking a lot longer than what they normally do, because it kind of gets back into that business case mentality where you have to get so many stakeholders on board and across it. What we're aiming for here is one decision maker and one sponsor who says, yes, this is the idea and I fund it and let's go for it and let's time box it. And at the end of that time box, we'll have an outcome that we can go back to the business with. It's a very different approach to that business case approach. The second one is need clarity on success criteria, but be open to new insights. So what I mean by this is that before you even start building your prototype or testing it with your customers, you need to be clear on what your success criteria is. It's not enough to go, we'll build this thing and let's see what customers think. There has to be real success criteria baked into it. So we're talking real numbers, real metrics that you will measure against from the start, because it's very easy that once you start building a prototype or once you start getting in front of customers, you change what success looks like. You have to have that up front. However, you may not hit these numbers, and that's okay. It just means that you have to then be open to new insights. So you may learn all sorts of things that you never intended to learn or thought you might learn, and that's okay. It may lead to a new idea or it may lead to a pivot of that idea. The third tip that I want to leave you with is find the quickest path to prototype. So I would assume a lot of us work in organizations which are very complex, especially technically, which limits how much you can do quickly. Some of the concepts of test and learn that we have embraced is around sandboxing. So sandboxing both from a technology point of view, so looking back at that same day delivery. Ideally, yes, when we roll it out and we scale it, we want it integrated with everything from our web platform to our back-end systems to our order management system. But at this stage, it wasn't connected to anything. And that's where we need to get to. So we need to sandbox it from a technology point of view and do manual workarounds. And we also need to sandbox it from a time point of view and give our teams a certain amount of time to get a prototype done. And whatever gets done in that time is what you take to customers. Otherwise, experiments can go on and on and on. The fourth one I've got there, and I touched on it earlier, was about how important it is to co-create. And we talk about co-creating with our team, with partners and customers. Because if we try and do this as individuals, or we try and do this with the same thinking that we've always done, we won't get the best results. So it's really important to have a cross-functional team who are hands-on and are willing to see it through. So if you look at the same day delivery one, we had transport in there, we had the actual team who would be doing the fulfillment. We actually had them sitting in the workshops from the start to make sure we had buy-in. Customers, obviously, we talked about how important it is to have them in there throughout the process, and also partners, because there's lots of people doing some really cool stuff, and they're often startups or small players, but they have the technology and they have the bones there that they're just looking for an opportunity to use. So we always look for how we can connect that startup community or new products or new initiatives into this process to test both for us and for them. And the fifth one is about enabling the methodology to spread through the organization. And this is what I touched on before, is that yes, you'll do test and learn on specific problems or specific initiatives, But the skills you'll learn in there will apply to all sorts of business problems. And what we see, and we have started seeing a super retail group, is that people start gravitating towards a test and learn approach. Even if it's not a formalized approach, that's okay. They're starting to going, well, instead of writing my business case, how can I just get on a prototype this? And that's great. Ideally, you'd have a formalized process so that we get that through and get those learnings documented and shared throughout the organization. But at the very least, it's a new way of working, and it will impact culture and the way that you actually approach business problems rather than a traditional way. So that was based on what we've done at Super Retail Group and my experience before that. They're the 5 things that I would say are most important in establishing test and learn and making sure that it really works.
Thanks, Nathan. That was a really, really good rundown, in depth and succinct in terms of what you were saying there. I suppose the first question would be, how and when did you come up with this concept of test and learn from the OODA loop?
So test and learn came about at Super Retail Group. And look, it's not a new concept. Lean methodology, agile methodology has been around for years. But for us, it was about, we were completing our digital transformation, and we looked at culture as a piece of digital transformation. And we said, culture won't change with beanbags or table tennis tables. Culture will change when we work differently, when we come up with new ways to solve old problems. And for us, we went, well, that's our in on culture, if we can change the way people work. So we did a bunch of design thinking activities with our teams, and we went through about 9 design thinking loops. And at the end of it, we said, look, this is a really strong methodology and we really like it. However, it's not fit for every business problem. It fits a lot, and there are parts of everything that work well across it, but we think that it needs a more holistic approach to be able to suit any business problem. So that's where we came up with a test and learn approach, which incorporates agile, it incorporates lean, and it incorporates, sorry, my door's just knocking. I'm gonna have to pause it.
Pause it there, it's okay.
When you look at lean around minimal viable product and prototyping especially, that's a key part of this. When you look at design thinking, especially the parts around empathy and around parts around empathy and about getting customer involvement throughout the whole stages is really key. And agile is the way we work, right? So it's about how do you do it in iterations? How do you do the ceremonies like the stand-ups and get the teams really working together and focused to move through quickly? Because at the end of this, you only have a couple of weeks really to do a prototype, and you've got to get moving through quickly. The insights from customers are just as important as building the prototype. So you need to be able to spend your time wisely. And, it's very tempting to spend all your time on prototyping and then rush your customer insights. It's important to spend as much time on both.
So is this massively different from traditional methods of project initiation and development?
It is. It is in terms of, we touched on earlier around the business case and how different it is. And obviously, so we've all seen business cases that take, months, if not years to get through. So our philosophy is don't just get in and do. Don't spend hours kind of making up numbers and hypotheticals around what this might do. You'll actually learn more from getting in, producing something, and getting it in front of your real customers quicker.
Yeah.
So that's the main approach, but it actually has real knock-on effects into once it gets taken on by a wider organization around the budgeting process. So how do you budget for this? And we've actually found that Test and Learn needs a dedicated budget. It's not a huge budget, but it needs a dedicated budget to draw people into it and to apply for that. It also impacts your strategy cycle. So traditionally, a strategy cycle has a roadmap which has years time frame on it. However, Test and Learn means that you have to be open to new opportunities at any time, and they can come in and out quickly. So they're the two biggies. But it is, and the business case is a huge one.
Yeah. So I suppose on that point, it's probably one thing to put together a business case and propose a new project, but to propose a different approach on top of this must be quite challenging for stakeholders, or with stakeholders rather.
Yeah, it is. It's hard because businesses have been using the traditional strategic approach for a long time. But once you work with stakeholders, and education is so important in this space, once you start working with stakeholders to say, actually, we've got reduced risk in this approach, we can actually build something quickly, and we can work out, and we'll actually save you money by killing it quickly or building features that people want. It has increased insight, especially across the customer piece, which we use not only for this project, but we use throughout the organisation for other projects moving forward. It has increased pace, and it has real validation. So we have real validation on projects before we scale them. So once you start taking people through that concept, it gets easier. The hard part is when you're in an organisation that needs to change quickly and have a full strategic agenda, moving forward quickly, and you say, you know, that project that you had approved, we actually want to stop that and do a prototype on it right now before we move forward at mass scale. And that's hard for people to swallow, and that makes sense because people are saying, no, we've got to get on with this, and educating people that this isn't a speed bump, but this is actually helping accelerate the project towards the right outcome is critical, but it can take time.
So is there a way you've tackled these challenges? Banging your head against a brick wall?
No, well, that's how you end up with a head like this. The biggest thing, the quickest way is through getting real initiatives up and running and involving those people in it, because the results speak for themselves. Once you start getting momentum and you start saying, oh, great, we're achieving a lot really quickly through this, and it's not slowing us down, it's actually speeding us up and getting great outcomes. Once you get the proof in the pudding, you're halfway there. Key to that is getting a mix of stakeholders within those groups. So, for example, you may have, a supply chain team, you may have an in-store team, you may have an IT team, but hey, we might also throw our CIO in there as well. So it's a real mix of people who can bring ideas into that group. So we actually, in our design thinking challenges early on, we made sure that our senior leadership team were all represented in one of those design thinking challenges. So you actually got hands-on experience with how that process worked.
So, just how you've explained it there, it almost seems like common sense. Why wouldn't you do it? I mean, it is. And beyond the kind of, I suppose, cultural barriers within business, is it a concept that can be rolled out easily if you have the stakeholders on side?
Yeah, look, it is a mindset shift, and I think that's where I touched on earlier around the biggest changes to culture. So you need to be ready to be open to failure, because there will be failures, but small scale failures. You need to have an environment where people are open about sharing information and about sharing their ideas and allowing others to come in on those ideas. And you need to have a level of autonomy where people can make quick decisions and move forward quickly, but come back to the wider group. If you decide to scale, come back to the wider group and consult then, but you need a level of autonomy to get on and do your prototype and get your customer validation. There are, depending on the type of organisation you're in, other challenges you may come up across are actually approaching customers. So some organisations, and I've heard the stories of this, is that some organisations aren't comfortable showing a non-finished product to their customers because their customers are used to the bright, shiny version. So you have to be sensible with how you do it. But you also need to embrace that, and it doesn't take long for that attitude to shift either. Yeah.
And I mean, you showed some quite broad examples there. Can this kind of method or methodology be applied to all areas of business and all scales of projects, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. So I showed examples there which went across, say, supply chain and fulfillment, to internal collaboration and team building, through to technology and digital. So it can be applied across any business problem. It typically works better on small to medium projects. Doesn't mean that it can't be used on large. However, your large projects typically need huge system integration. So typically the technology integration is the hardest piece to get around. So if you've got a project that is a full system overhaul, test and learn might not be your best thing. We typically find that any customer offering or any customer proposition can be your best bet. So one thing that I will point out about test and learn is that you actually don't have to build the thing. So a prototype can be anything from storyboard, a video mock-up, through to you're actually building the minimal viable product. But it can be any version of that that allows you to get customer input at an early stage. And a lot of that will help build that product. I saw a great example on the weekend of someone who had an idea for a new product. And instead of building anything, the first thing that they did was build a GoFundMe page. And they put it out there to friends and family to say, hey, if I actually executed this idea, what would you be willing to pay for it? And that was a great way to get real validation of getting people to put their money where their mouth is. So there are various ways you can prototype things, and those ways will change depending on the organization, the size of the project, or the area of the business that is involved.
Yeah. And I suppose on that point, I mean, obviously you're coming from with these examples within the retail domain. Does this model work cross domain?
Yeah, absolutely. So that example that I was just telling you about for the GoFundMe was actually from the water industry on the weekend. So they held a hackathon which had a similar methodology to this, but theirs was all about how will we improve water for the residents of southeast Queensland, which is a very broad topic, right, and very different from retail. But all these methodologies have been used through finance, through construction, and the rest. So it can be applied to any industry. Right.
And obviously, innovation, disruption, words of the moment. It seems this is something that could kick that off. I mean, is test and learn something that will help promote the next disruptive thing or the next innovative product?
It can. I tend to be really careful when talking around innovation with this because absolutely you can do some really innovative things if that's solving your business problem that you're setting out for. But at the same time, you can achieve some great stuff that's really basic. And if I take it back to our creating a cafe example, that was solving the problem of how do we get people to talk to each other. There's nothing innovative around getting people to talk to each other, but you have to think a little bit different. So I probably tend to say it's more about allowing people to be creative and about being able to execute those creative ideas. And sure, sometimes you'll come up with the most innovative concepts going around, and that's fantastic. But our end goal isn't innovation. Our end goal is solving business problems in a new way.
Okay, that makes sense. And I suppose final question, or maybe not the final question. What are you going to be doing with this test and learn going forward?
So test and learn is the main offering of 12 High. 12 High launching in April, which we're really excited to do. And I want to bring what we've done at Super Retail Group and bring the digital experience into other organisations who may look at this and may be thinking, well, how do I actually allow our teams to work a little bit differently so we can respond faster to the market, so we can be more efficient, so that we can respond to our competitors, and ideally be more innovative in the way that we do things. And 12 High specialises in bringing that OODA loop methodology into other organisations to work with their teams to develop those solutions rapidly. So it's not about an engagement that lasts forever. It's about coming in, solving business problems quickly, enabling your team to solve that, and leaving those skills with your team to take through your organization even further. So that's what I'm focusing in on now, is spreading that out through other organizations.
Great. Well, all the best with it. Actually, one final question. I see you're a mad football fan on your presentation. Who do you support?
Well, Man United, Canberra Raiders, Sydney Swans. They're the big three.
Right. You might have lost some audience or gained some audience there. I don't know which way around.
I'm glad you asked it at the end. I'm not sure I should have said Man United. You don't win any friends there.
Well, but no, this will be an international audience, so yeah, that's most of London covered in terms of support. You've got the London vote with Man United. Anyway, well, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Nathan. Really appreciate it. Really good rundown. And as I say, all the best with 12 High. Hopefully, we'll be seeing a lot more of you and the business. And for now, thanks for taking the time to give us a rundown about test and learn. And I think there's some really interesting concepts, or the whole concept is something that could be taken away. I mean, certainly for me, there's a lot there I'd like to take to our business. But we'd probably have to have a meeting about a meeting about a meeting about it. There you go. Maybe I forget you.
That's great. Thanks, Russell. It was great to chat.
Great. Thanks.